Hello, this is Marco Rock. Welcome to Marco Rock TV. I am Marco Rock, your host for Inside a Great Mind, where we interview entrepreneurs, active, game-changing leaders for the purpose to inspire and inform you. Today, we're so thrilled to have the Chief of Omaha Police Department, Mr. Chief Todd Schmaderer. How are you, Chief?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on.
It is a pleasure. So tell us who's Chief Todd Schmaderer.
Well, I've been Chief of the Omaha Police Department for about 8 years now. That puts me as the longest serving chief in modern history. So 8 years is a long time for my field. Happy to do this, and I look forward to many more years to come. Omaha Police Department's got about 1,200 employees. So we're a major city, and with all the complexities associated with that in law enforcement, and just in a personal life, got two kids, and one is 20 and one is 17. So they keep me very busy with their sports and their life.
Yeah. So in the wake of George Floyd death, there have been protests and conversation about racism and police brutality. What leadership approach are you taking during this challenging time?
Right. Well, first of all, very early on, as soon as we saw the incident that occurred in Minneapolis, as a management team, myself and my deputy chiefs put out a statement denouncing what occurred there. That was no way, shape, or form the way we will police in the Omaha Police Department, and the full criminal justice system should work towards getting justice for Mr. Floyd. So we wanted to make sure we were on that level playing field. And we also realized that that's going to have a negative impact on police community relations, definitely in Minneapolis, but we felt all across the country. So we wanted to make sure that we tended to our relationships here as best that we could, because it's something that has brought us great fortune within the Omaha community, our police community relationships and our partnerships. But as the protests started to unfold across the country, we had one primary mission, and that was we wanted to ensure voices were heard in a peaceful, lawful protest. And we did everything in our power to ensure that those voices were heard. Now, when it crossed the line and safety became compromised, we had to take on a little bit different role. But our goal was to ensure that that voice was heard. And we feel it was within the city of Omaha.
So we understand that, part of Omaha, the protests kind of turned a little violent. Do you think there's a measure that could have taken to make it more peaceful than what happened?
Yeah, we're really analyzing that, because that's something that doesn't occur often. We have large contingents of officers that were assigned to all those protest events, and there was about 30 of them. I'm not sure if everybody realized there was that many, but there was 30 large events. And we probably had a dozen agencies working with us, and of course the National Guard was towards the end. So as we're analyzing everything, certainly there are things that I'm seeing that we could do better, especially on the coordination front. But as far as our overall operating instructions, and that was, look, we're going to let everybody vent, we're going to let everybody get their voices heard, we're here for peaceful protest and respecting everybody's First Amendment rights. And we won't take any action at all unless we really have to. And I felt early on in this analysis that our patience was good. Our patience was good. Now there's some areas of execution that we're looking into that I feel can be done better. And those will all be presented to the mayor and the city council, and then they will have the freedom to release those to the public.
So there are overwhelming evidence of racial profiling. Do you believe there is racism within your department? If so, what are you doing to address that?
Sure. So I do think there's racism within all large entities, all large organizations, whether it be a large organization like the Omaha Police Department or a large corporation. I think anytime you have a subset of a large contingent of employees who are people representing the community, you're going to have some that you're not pleased with how they carry themselves. And that's just kind of the nature of a large organization. But it's incumbent upon that organization, the CEO, and in my case, the chief, to ensure that we hire the right people, we train the right way, we establish the proper culture through instruction, through discipline, general and specific deterrence, and through our policies to minimize any dangerous aspect that would bring into our careers, which when we interact with the public as much as we do, I've got to ensure that the officers that are interacting are professional and mature enough and without bias.
So on that point, I'm going to touch a little bit on diversity within your workforce. I know one of your priorities is to make sure your workforce is diverse.
Absolutely.
So what step are you taking to make sure that your goal are effective?
Absolutely. Well, diversity is something that we have put a premium on here because we really feel being reflective of the community is a best business practice for policing. But not only that, the various perspectives that you get from a diverse workforce has played out very nicely as we've strategized for the future, as we've implemented policies. And quite frankly, as a chief executive, I want various feedback. I want feedback from various different points of view so that I can get a good synopsis of what direction we need to go on this police department. So diversity is something we've always put a premium on, and we've been very fortunate to have increased that diversity. I think we were at right around 6% of African American officers when I took over as chief. We're at about 9 now. Okay. We would have been at 10%, but we had some retirements and just some natural exits leave.
Okay.
So we're comfortable with our progression, certainly as it relates to our peers in other major cities. But we really are looking to get up to that 13 to 15% ratio, and we have the appropriate applicant pool to get there. One thing that I have noticed over the last 4 or 5 years, that our applicants of diversity have been very good to us.
Okay.
Very solid. We're getting the numbers, and we're looking to take them. So our next recruit class will be either later this year or next year, and there has probably been about 5 to 7 recruit classes that have taken place just since I've been chief, and we've averaged probably almost 20% African Americans in those classes.
Okay.
So that's how we're edging the bar up.
Okay. I understand also there's some policy change and procedure within your department. Can you share with us one of the key things you guys are doing, and so people are aware?
Sure. Yeah. So let me lay a little foundation, then I'll get into some of the changes that we made after hearing everything that was going on with the protests locally and nationally as well. We really paid great attention to it. First of all, the whole protest centered around what took place in Minneapolis, but the broader picture was just the number of in-custody deaths that were occurring with law enforcement.
Okay.
Generally, that is in the form of a officer-involved shooting. So we've taken great strides throughout the course of the last really 3-4 years to really address that. In 2010, we had 11 officer-involved shootings in the city of Omaha.
Okay.
Last year, we had 1. This year, we've had 0 so far. So a city our size, you're going to see 6 or 7. Not everybody will die from those. Some will. So we wanted to make sure we had a good handle on that. So to have 1 last year and 0 this year is really not only statistically impressive, but we feel it's because of the foundation that we've laid. All officers in the Omaha Police Department have body cameras. All officers have tasers. And that taser is a less lethal option. And you got to supply your officers with that option, otherwise they'll have to go to their firearms more. We've made great strides in the mental health field. Law enforcement officers are oftentimes the first person to reach and connect with somebody with mental illness through 911, through other reports. So it's incumbent to have a very robust training program, very educated officers on that field, and we have mental health professionals called co-responders that respond to those calls with us. And that has proven to be just tremendously successful in the city of Omaha. And then we have a training program and an early warning tracking system where we can gauge and monitor our officers that tend to be in trouble more often. Those 5 things have really put us in a good space. But after seeing the protests and after listening to what we were hearing locally, there were a few changes to our use of force policy that I felt were prudent. The main one would be the duty to intervene. And what that is, if you're an officer on the scene and you witness another officer use an excessive force, you must intervene. It is now policy. If you don't, you could be anything up to termination for not intervening. As chief, the incident in Minneapolis with George Floyd and the officer that was on his neck was horrible to watch. But as I watched that, I could almost take that officer and just say, you know what, there's something not right coursing through your body. Something not right. What really disturbed me was the other officers who did not intervene. That told me that there was probably some type of cultural issue within that department. And as chief, culture and having the proper mechanism with culture moving forward is the best way to police in a community. And we implemented the duty to intervene for that reason. We also made it strictly forbidden to do the knee to the neck.
Okay.
We've never trained on that, Marco, but we decided we better put that into policy. Let's put it right front and center. And then also the chokeholds. We don't train in the chokeholds. We haven't for some time in the Omaha Police Department, but I did want to outlaw those and ban those altogether. So those are three things that we saw from the protest that we thought could even enhance our game even better and put out a better product for our community.
Okay. So how do you improve public confidence, especially in the black community?
How do we improve the confidence? A couple ways. We've always had community partners, and it's always been our priority. And for 8 years, we've watched our homicide numbers drop significantly, our shooting numbers drop significantly, our diversity increase, and our reforms within the police department have been more advanced than other cities because of the partnerships that we've had. So, for one, I want to continue that momentum. It's important if you have a nice track record of statistical reductions with a good community partners to continue that front. But the other piece is you got to recognize that there's damage done. Even if it wasn't done necessarily by the Omaha Police Department, there was still damage done. And it makes you realize that we have a lot further to go. So we really have two choices here. We can feel sorry for ourselves and say we've done all this and now it's all just been taken away. Or we can solidify our partnerships and move this thing forward. And that's kind of the step that we've chosen to take. And we've expressed that communication to our partners, and they've been very receptive with the Omaha Police Department. I look forward to Omaha as we make strides in the aftermath of the protest, and I believe they will be measurable strides. And at some point in time, we need to go back and revisit that. We need to revisit, did we make measurable strides? Because if we didn't, we still have work to do.
How do you encourage a good policy and avoid violence between police and citizen?
Well, policy is something that guides what you do as an agency. But what instills what you do in an agency is to train on that policy. The Omaha Police Department is a large entity. We have a lot of policies. But as chief, I need to make sure the policies, as it relates to our interactions with our community, especially in the area of use of force and when you're detaining somebody, it's a very awesome responsibility. You have to do it right because of the public trust piece. In order to instill that those are your priorities, you have to train on them. And they have to become part of your culture, and you have to hold officers responsible that go afoul of those policies. So what we've done, for example, in the aftermath of our use of force changes of duty to intervene, no chokeholds, we have a training program set up that will start in late July that all members of the Omaha Police Department will go through. There will be a George Floyd case study. There will be training on all our new use of force implementations. There will be implicit bias training. There will be cultural competency training. And then there will be some tactical training as well as to how to best handle situations in which you have to make an arrest. What we're looking to do there is instill those policies and procedures into the minds of those officers and into the culture of the Omaha Police Department.
How can we educate the public about where to enter with the police officer? Because we also have to take account the safety of the police officers.
Right.
Yeah. How do we go back to educate the public so they know that I can do this thing if I get approached by the police, I don't know to run, all those kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So law enforcement officers, we're tasked with the lawful responsibility. It's our job to make sure that we intervene in dangerous situations to make them better. We also are tasked with enforcing the law, and sometimes that puts us in contact with citizens that have committed crimes, but oftentimes, most of the time, everybody we come in contact is just a normal citizen.
Yeah.
If you commit a traffic infraction, I do and everybody does. So what we train our officers on, first of all, is when you make contact, you have to understand. You have to be culturally aware that someone of color that we're coming in contact with may view this uniform very differently, may have fears that others don't have. So the first thing we teach our officers is once things are safe, alleviate that person's concerns. Take some time to express to them that you understand how they're feeling and be very clear how the interaction will go. I just want your driver's license. I just want your insurance. And once I do that, I'll check to make sure you don't have any warrants. We'll get you on your way. It's that explanation and understanding of what they're feeling that I think is a great way to diffuse a situation. Now, from the citizen side of things, the best thing you could do for us to help diffuse the situation is to simply comply with what the officer says. If the officer is being very direct with their verbiage, they might have a reason for that. Just comply with what they say. And then when it's all done, if there's anything that went wrong, we can look at it at that point in time. But if you're issued a citation or you're going to be placed under arrest, that is not the time to challenge it, okay? Because law enforcement officers, as I said earlier, they have a duty to make those arrests, and that's their job, so they will do that. And then if you stopped them with driving a car, just get your hands on the wheel for us so they can see your hands. That puts the officer at ease, makes the interaction go a lot smoother. And the last thing is I would encourage any member of the community that has a bad interaction with the Omaha Police Department, let me know, let a community member know that they know how to get a hold of me. And I'll get an investigation started, because if I don't know about it, I can't correct it.
Exactly. Well, let's focus the last part of conversation on Mr. Todd Schmaderer. So, if you were to be an animal, what kind of animal would you be and why?
That is a really good question.
Yeah.
The way I will answer that question is, we're asking our officers to be guardians of a community.
Okay.
Guardians, not adversaries. We're not at war. Guardians. So if I could be an animal, what is an animal that guards? And I can think of a sheepdog.
Okay.
It's a strange answer, right? But that sheepdog will watch over the flock.
Okay.
And will watch over the group of sheep there. And I guess that's the way I want my officers to view themselves. I don't want them to be warriors. I want them to be sheepdogs. And since I'm asking that of them, that's what I'll say.
All right, start with you. Yeah.
Yep.
If you had the power to make one positive change in the world right now, what would that be and why?
One positive change?
Yes.
I would sure love to have an opportunity to reset the dial on race relations and come to some common ground. I think that when you spend time around another person, no matter what gender, what race, if you really think about it, once you spend time around that person, how often do you leave disliking that person? Not very often. Most of the time you leave and you just like that person once you get to know them. And because that's impossible, because that's impossible to get to know everybody on this world, one thing I would like to do is have a clean, if I could start it over, to have a clean slate where nobody saw race, nobody saw gender. Unfortunately, society doesn't progress that way.
Yeah.
So everything's a progression. So the best thing we can do, since I can't make that one big swing, the best thing we can do is continue that progression upward. And the best thing I can do as chief is be a part of that as much as I can.
What would be your last advice or message to the community at this point?
My message is I want to thank you for having me on. I want to thank your audience for watching me. I want to thank this community for opening themselves up to the Omaha Police Department and allowing us to be partners as we try to reduce crime, try to improve quality of life. We have a number of successful measures that are playing out in the city of Omaha that are not playing out so great in other cities. Minneapolis is a city very comparable in size to Omaha, two very different places. Omaha can be a leader on this front because our partnerships with the community have been going so well. And I attribute that to the community wanting to be partners with us, and we want to be partners back. And within any relationship, there's going to be ups and downs. But it's how you address those ups and downs, and do you constantly progress afterwards. And that is my goal as chief. So if any member of your audience wants to reach out to me and point something out that would help our progression, we're open to it, because this is an opportunity for me to be out there, and because I can't be there with 500 members of the community, but the more people that will watch this, the better. And together, Omaha will take another stride forward and make a better community for everybody.